ladies and gentlemen, my name's Scyushi, and this is going to be a video dedicated to the Path of Exile skill tree. Now, it's going to be a pretty short video because I'm most of all having this to try and make the skill tree less daunting to you. The goal of this video is to kind of tell you why you would pick one class over another, because the skill tree itself might seem like, oh my God, what is this? This is insane. And then you realize that this is the skill tree of every class in the game. The only difference is where you start on the skill tree. So in my case, being a witch or necromancer, I start in the same slot that the sorcerer spawns in. The difference being is that a lot of slots on my skill tree will give minion damage, whereas the sorcerer and some of the other classes in the game won't actually have minion damage on their skill tree. Instead, it would just be elemental damage or what have you. It is a little bit weird that it does that, but I mean, hey, whatever. Generally speaking, your skill tree is going to be where you will focus your class, at least until you get to the super late portion of the game. So for example, all of this stuff around here for the witch is going to end up being towards minions, survivability with energy shield, and what have you. But eventually you can start to jet off and do some crazier stuff, especially if you actually know what you're doing, which I kind of do, at least in terms of the witch. You'll kind of get the hang of it just as you play the game, and it does a pretty good job just slowly inching you towards like specific nodes that would be like, oh, this is something that I want to value on a warrior, stun build up, so I'm gonna start going for that versus going for melee damage. The only thing that really dynamically changes the build of your character once you have enough skill slots that you can kind of just go all over the place is the Ascendancy, aka your class's subclass. The 6 different classes in the game currently have 2 subclasses each, or 2 Ascendancies each. Eventually, this game is going to have 12 classes in total with 3 Ascendancies each. This is why in today's video, I'm not going to go into detail about all of the Ascendancies, just to state that they are game-changing for how you would end up building your class. To the point where I've seen people start as a sorcerer or a mage, and then they go into chrono mage, which is time abilities, slowing down enemies, freezing time, and what have you. But then they actually spec into warrior abilities and end up being a weird hybrid melee class, because slowing down enemies and then utilizing melee abilities is a really good combination. Another busted build that a lot of my friends have referred to using is a mercenary that specs into quarterstaffs and using monk abilities. I don't think this is something that you should even consider doing until you've had a significant amount of time playing the game, or if you just look up builds online, I mean, whatever. But the point being is the late game would be taking a class specifically because of its ascendancy and then building around that. You will, of course, still start in the same location on the skill tree node, but that's why they have all of these like highways the developers refer to, because it's a lot less nodes that you have to spend to get to these very specific nodes. Another thing to consider with the skill tree that's really, really important is at any time you can just start searching in the top right, and it'll end up highlighting any of the nodes that have that specific piece of text inside it. I messed that up and did not spell minion correctly, but yeah, there you go. So you can see right here. Also, if you ever get confused about any of the specific stat values, you can end up just clicking on any of these and it'll end up giving you an in-game description of it, so you don't have to rely on the wiki. Now that said, there is going to be some stats in this game, I'm not going to give you any examples, but some stats in this game that are explained very, very weirdly, and something that a lot of Path of Exile fans are used to is keeping close attention to the wording of these abilities, because that's going to end up being something that might be like, why aren't I dealing damage? And then you read the wording and it's like, oh. But while we are talking about the skill tree, I think that it's important for us to talk about the character abilities, namely all of these stats up here. So going through them in order, life obviously is your life value. If your life reaches 0, you are dead. Energy shield is like a halo shield that slowly ends up recharging as you don't take damage for a certain amount of time. Your mana is your mana. Pretty much every class, unfortunately, is determined by their mana. It's the amount of mana that it costs to cast all of your abilities. Of course, depending on your character, you might just get rid of mana altogether, like with Infernalist, which is my Ascendancy right now. I don't actually have mana. Instead, I have infinite mana, but it overheats and eventually damages me if I don't manage it correctly. Spirit is going to be a stat that's allocated to support or to spirit gems, sorry. And spirit gems, in my case, would just be all of my minions take spirit, but then there's also like passive buffs that you can have on spirit gems that will also take spirit, and then they take more spirit based on the amount of support gems that they have. Yeah. Then there's armor, which is probably the worst stat value in the game. I've talked about this extensively with one of my friends, and I think we both agree that armor should also equal stun threshold, because right now stun threshold is kind of like a separate resistance, which we'll get into that. Essentially, armor will negate physical damage only, and just the way that it scales is pretty bad. Like, I've had this at like 90% and I still get one shot on my warrior. Evasion, on the other hand, is a chance to avoid damage altogether. And at first, this will only be for strikes or projectiles. Strikes being, as it says, a melee attack that directly hits with a weapon or body part. So when an enemy does like a slam down attack or shoots you with a spell, that's actually different than strikes or projectiles. So you don't end up evading those. The point being is there's a skill tree node that you can get that makes it so you can evade everything. Block percentage is block chance, and that will work towards strikes, projectiles, what have you. And probably most importantly of all is going to end up being the resistances. So fire resist, cold resist, lightning resist, and chaos resist. All of these are stats that you can get on your gear. More so than that, you can get increased to maximum on your skill tree. And resistances are another thing that me and my friend have just discussed at length, and we kind of hate it because it actually has a pretty linear value that slowly gets better and better the higher value. Like it's very strange because in every other video game, the stat will have diminishing returns. But weirdly enough, this stat starts to actually get better returns as you go up to its maximum value by getting extra max value in the skill tree. Like, getting it up to 76% is a pretty significant increase over the base 75% that it has. And then of course there's going to end up being the basic stats, which dexterity will give you accuracy. Accuracy is your chance to hit with like a physical attack. It kind of is a value that goes against the evasion rating of the enemy type. And Dex will also give you an extra support gem capacity for Dex gems, intelligence as well, but it gives you more mana, and then the strength gives you more life. The point being is that most players would be coming into this game and think that strength determines damage, right? But that's not actually the case. Strength is just going to give you more life. The way it goes, the way it ends up giving you more damage is because it'll allow you to equip stronger gear. Oh, and I should also mention these numbers down at the bottom here. You can see I need to have a certain amount of strength, dexterity, and intelligence to allocate the support gem slots, because if I don't have enough of these said stats, it means that it's going to end up just outright disabling the support slots that are going over this threshold. And then of course, some of the hidden stats is going to end up being movement speed, rarity of items found, which is magic find, and my least favorite, stun threshold. Because if you don't have enough stun threshold, your character, when you get staggered infinitely, like in Diablo 4, which is one of the worst aspects of that game and also one of the worst aspects of this game, la-di-da, stun threshold can make it so that you can keep moving and keep playing the game instead of getting stun locked. In any case, I hope that you found this video helpful, and I would appreciate if you left a like. You can subscribe for more if you want. Of course, I'm still going to be covering lots of Path of Exile in the months to come as the game gets closer and closer to its full release. I just want new content, dude. Oh my God. Anyways, thanks for watching.